Hello everyone, my name is Kiana Sadowski, and for my personal project for this class, I decided to create a lovely picture book of a Roman mythological folktale, and it is called Cupid and Psyche. So once upon a time, there was a king and a queen who had 3 daughters. The 2 eldest were nothing special, of course, but the young daughter was so wonderfully beautiful, and the fame of her beauty was so intense that people from other countries would come to see this girl. And they would bring her lots of virtues and honors that were due to the goddess Venus. And she was the goddess of love and beauty. So this greatly offended her when men decided to give her this mere mortal, these honors that were due to this goddess, and they deserted her altars. So Venus, beyond angry and offended by this, she sent her mischievous son Cupid to strike the mortal girl in her heart and make her a very undeserving, mean being, to have a passion for it. So Cupid went along and he grabbed 2 vases of water from the fountains of his mother. So he grabbed 1 pitcher full of water of bitter and 1 of sweet. And he went to Psyche's chambers, and he had poured the drops of bitter water across her lips as she was sleeping. But he began to feel pity for her as he looked at her. But he shook it off, and he picked his arrow and poked at her side, but it made her jump awake. Luckily, she could not see him because he was invisible, but because she was looking right in his direction, he got scared and alarmed him, and he ended up hurting himself with his own arrow. Because of this wound, he felt that he needed to fix what he had done, and so he poured all of the sweet water across her hair, and he left. Now, Psyche did not benefit from this beauty of hers, because nobody was asking for her hand in marriage. Her 2 sisters had already been wedded to princes. So her parents thought, and they feared, that they had offended the gods or angered them, so they went to the oracle Apollo begging for some sort of answer. And he told them that she was destined to marry a monster who lived atop the mountain, and he was not mortal, and she was destined to marry him, and she would be there forever. And they began to mourn because this monster could not be resisted by man nor God. And so they began to mourn, and they began to grieve along with everyone else. They were in distress. And then Psyche goes to her parents and she says, "Why do you grieve this situation when I have been giving these undeserving virtues and praises? This is what has sealed my fate." And so her and her parents climbed up the mountain as they had went up the mountain. And as Psyche waited at the top of the mountain, her eyes began to break with tears because she was so afraid. But Zephyr, the gentle god, carried her in the palm of his hand, just like this, and set her into a very flowery meadow. As she composed herself, she began to fall asleep in the beautiful meadow. As she woke, she felt very refreshed the next morning, and she saw a beautiful grove of trees and a path. And so she went through the path. She saw this beautiful fountain that had crystal waters, and near it was this beautiful building that had golden pillars that held up this vaulted roof. And across the walls of the building, as she began to explore, she saw carvings and paintings of the chase and of beautiful life itself. And as she began to explore this beautiful place, she heard voices. And these voices, she looked around and there was nobody to be seen. And the voices were invisible, and they began to speak to her. And they told Psyche that everything that you see belongs to you. We are your humble servants, and we will do anything that you ask. Why don't you go take a bath and go lay in your beautiful down bed? And come when you are ready. Dinner will be waiting for you. And so she went to this alcove right here, which is a type of seat. And all of a sudden, this dinner table appeared with bountiful amounts of delicious food and wine. And music began to play from invisible voices. And and invisible loot. And as time passed, she had still never seen her husband. He only came in the dead of night and would flee before dawn, and she began to fall in love with him. And she would beg him to stay in the morning before he would leave, but he would not consent. He would just go before daylight. And she would ask him, and he would ask her, "Why do you need to see me? Do you doubt my love for you? If you see me, I'm afraid that you will see that I'm a monster, and I would rather you love me as an equal than adore me as a god." So this reasoning kept Psyche quiet for quite some time, until she began to think about how her parents didn't know what had happened to her, and she was not sharing these beautiful, wonderful delights with her wonderful sisters. And so one night, as her husband arrived, and she of course could not see him, she asked for her sisters to come visit her, and he was very unwilling, but he agreed. So Zephyr, upon Psyche's husband's command, helped her sisters into their sister's valley. And she began to show them all these wonderful things and all of her treasures, let them take baths in her bath, give them food and drinks and refreshments. But her sisters felt envious of their sister, Psyche. They did not approve of this. They were jealous. So they became very mischievous, and they kept asking questions, lots and lots of questions that seemed impossible, an impossible amount. But they were mostly towards her husband, and Psyche would lie at first, saying, "Oh, he's a very young youth, is very beautiful, and he loves to hunt in the daytime. That's why he's not here right now." And they pressed on, not happy with this answer. And so she said, "Well, I've never seen him. He only comes in the night." And her sisters were like, "Whoa, well, you were destined to marry a monster. He's probably going to devour you. So you must hide a knife in a lamp and wait till he is asleep. And if you see a monster, you must cut off his head." So Psyche tried her best not to think of these comments, but she could not help but feel this nervousness and succumb to suspicion. So she hid a knife, a lamp, in a drawer. She waited till her husband fell asleep. But when she snuck out of bed and she lit the lamp, she lit it towards her husband and saw not a monster, but a beautiful god. He was very charming, and he had golden curls and white as snow skin with crimson cheeks and white, shiny feathered wings. And as she leaned closer, she accidentally dripped some oil on the god's shoulders. And the god was so upset, and he just looked at her, and he flew out the window. And Psyche tried to chase him, but she ended up falling out the window, as you can see there. And so he stopped, and he told her that she was a fool, and that this is really how she repays him after all. He's given her so much love, and he disobeyed his mother, and that she should just go to her sister